So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Ellie Davison from the University of Lincoln in the UK. Her talk is about inclusive teaching practice, widening participation and closing the attainment gap. You're going to talk also about student success. So over to you, Ellie, and thanks so much for coming along.
Hi, everybody. No, thank you so much for having me and for inviting me along tonight. It's really nice to see you all. First, little hands up. I'm afraid I'm a Zoom novice, so I will do my best, but please shout at me if I'm not sharing the things that I say I'm sharing. I will give it a go now to share my screen. Okay, so has that shared my PowerPoint with you? Is that okay? Brilliant.
Yeah,
thank you, William. Okay, so yeah, I'm Ellie Davison from the University of Lincoln. I'm an associate professor there, and I'm director of teaching and learning for the Foundation Studies Centre. So we run a variety of widening participation programmes as part of the College of Science. So before we get going, if I can just raise your awareness to a Padlet that we've set up for tonight. So on the screen there, hopefully is a QR code, which you can just grab with your phone if you want to, or there's a link there. And actually, I might copy that link and just pop it in the Zoom chat in case that helps anybody access it. Oh, except the Zoom chat's disappeared. As I said, Zoom novice. Oh. Don't know how to help you there, but there we go. If you can just type the link in or use the QR code, that will get you to a Padlet. Let me show you. Has that moved to the Padlet just to check? Yes, fantastic. Okay, so this has just got some resources and some chat boxes for us in case we want to use them tonight. So to use Padlet, if you're not familiar with it, you just press the little plus in the column that you want to type into. Type your comment and press publish. So let's get rid of that. Just before we get started then, I think higher education can be a really alien environment sometimes, especially for students who could be the first in families to come to university, and how this new game that we're asking them to play actually works can be clouded in swathes of terminology and acronyms and language that we just don't see in everyday life. So one of the things I'm going to talk about later is a higher education terminology, glossary that we've put together. So I just thought I'd ask you to start off with, is there any higher education terminology that's ever foxed you in the past? Maybe starting as an academic, or even when you were a student yourself, that you just thought, I don't know what that means, or it took a while for the penny to drop. The first one's popped up there on Padlet is the difference between formative and summative. That always foxes students, and I think that was new to me once upon a time as well. So if you've got any suggestions of confusing terminology that you've come across in the past, just press the plus button there and pop them in the box, and we'll come back to those later. That'd be really good. So while you're doing that, I will pop back to my slides. And something else that I wanted to draw your attention to, something that our students have found really helpful over the last couple of years in online sessions and also face-to-face, is when we use the live caption feature that goes straight to their device, rather than displaying sort of sometimes wildly inaccurate captions across the screen. So I'm going to do that today in case it's something that's new to anybody. So if we press present live, that should bring up yet another QR code when it loads, or a link. So if you want to fire your phone or your device at that QR code, or just use the link, and the link will be at the top of all the slides from now on. I'm going to do it just to check it's working. They should send the captions to your device as live captions as we go through tonight. There we go. If there's any problems with that, please do let me know. I can see some people are joining, so hopefully it's working. This is a really interesting caption function because it gets more accurate the more of your key terminology you have on your slides, so that the technology can recognize those key terms and help it to make your captions more accurate. So in my lectures, when I'm talking about homozygous and heterozygous and karyotypes, sometimes it's helpful to have those on my slides. Okay. So a little bit of background about me and about where I come from in Lincoln. We're involved with the Lincoln Science Foundation Year, which is an alternative pathway into higher education for students who don't meet the standard entry requirements for direct entry into our programmes. And that can be for a variety of reasons. So sometimes it's a combination of subject areas. Often our applicants haven't taken enough science because they didn't realise quite what they wanted to do when they took their options. It might be that for a variety of reasons, they've achieved lower than expected grades, especially over the last couple of years with all the difficulties of the pandemic and personal circumstances, additional learning needs not quite being met. Students aren't quite making the entry requirements, so they come to us for an extra boost. It might be that students have taken non-traditional qualifications, or we see a lot of mature students who have taken a break from education. They may have hit a ceiling at work and they need to make that jump into higher education in order to be able to progress. So they come back to us. And we're an integrated year zero. So we're not a separate year as such, but we add on a year, a starting year zero to all our programmes. So a 3-year degree programme would become a 4-year degree programme and so on. And we have around 250 students studying with us each year across 40 different bachelor's and master's programmes across 5 schools in the college. So maths and physics, engineering, pharmacy, chemistry and life sciences. So the Science Foundation Year is diversifying the college intake. So we now account for, I think, nearly a half of the School of Pharmacy intake. And that means that the makeup of those student bodies is changing. So Lincoln is a very rural, really quite non-diverse region of the UK. But the Science Foundation Year intake has...
Robert, could you take in the towels and bathing suits?
has nearly 40% Black and Asian and minority ethnicity students, as opposed to 14% of the Lincoln direct entrance. And our percentage of students from the lowest socioeconomic quintiles is double the national average. And we sort of had fingers crossed that we were going to be doing okay. And when our results came out, it was really encouraging. So we're tracking our Science Foundation Year students through later years of their degree. And when we look at how they attain in year 1 and compare them to the direct entry students, despite much lower entry tariffs in terms of their grades, they're outperforming the direct entry students across the college. And when we look at some of the student background characteristics, our SFY alumni BAME students are attaining 10% higher than the year 1 average. Our mature students are doing even better, so they're attaining 13% higher than the year 1 average, whereas in direct entrant mature students, often they struggle a little bit and achieve slightly lower than the average. In terms of student wellbeing and additional needs, SFY alumni with mental health conditions, which we know are hugely on the rise, especially anxiety disorders at the moment, they're attaining nearly 10% greater than direct entry students with mental health conditions. And those with non-standard qualifications are also doing really well, at about 7% higher than direct entry students with alternative qualifications, and obviously at much higher grades when they come in. So we think there's probably 3 main areas that are important for our students when it comes to supporting them to succeed. Possibly the welcome that we give them into higher education, then how personal their educational experiences feel, and then finally whether they feel that sense of belonging. So do they feel represented, included, valued and connected within their educational experiences? So I'll start with the welcome and just pick out a few bits that we've found work well. We found that developing a sense of community right from the beginning is really important, and relationships can be developed even before students arrive in Lincoln. So we try and run over the summer some lab sessions for our local schools, especially those in challenging socioeconomic areas. For the A-level sciences these days, students need to have their PAGs, their practical assessed groups, which is a tick to say that they've met all the practical criteria in their science A-levels. But some schools are struggling because they just haven't got the equipment or the specialist expertise to be able to run these. And we don't want those students to be disadvantaged. So we invite them into our labs and we support them to do those PAGs, and then offer training to the teachers as well, so that they can reinforce the theory when they get back to the classroom. So some of our intake we've already met over the summer, which is really nice. We have a much greater percentage of students in the Science Foundation year with additional learning needs than in direct entrance. So we try and make sure that they feel really welcome and confident before they join them. And along with the Student Wellbeing Centre at Lincoln, we run a Wellbeing Orientation Week, or a WOW week in the summer, where students come in, they live in the accommodation for a week. They come into the lecture theatres, they have sample lectures, they meet their lecturers, their tutor, we take them around the city and just try and build confidence that they're going to be okay and that they know where they're going. And just simple things, they know where they might sit in the lecture theatre that's near to a plug for their phone, just really calming things that mean that it's not all new to them. And actually, they might be the experts when the rest of the cohort get there. And then we try and make sure that we welcome students from as many different walks of life as possible. So as well as students who've got those level 3 qualifications, we also value work or life experience and offer an interview route for students who can evidence their aptitude and commitment to the course in other ways. So that's something that we've started with the engineering programmes this year. So on to the transition at the start of the academic year. In that summer before arrival, we try and help students to feel really confident with the learning that they're about to meet in the first couple of weeks. So for all modules, we have pre-learning activities available for them to get their teeth stuck in. And this can also help students who've been out of education for a while. If that knowledge is all a bit hazy and it was a long time ago, it gives them the resources to refresh their knowledge and ensure that they've met the content in those lectures in the first couple of weeks, and that they really feel that they can get to grip with it. And we try and bridge that knowledge so that they're coming in at a level that they're really going to succeed at. So that's optional, but lots of students take us up on it. And in terms of tailored support, we also ask students to complete an initial reflection document. So the students discuss their individual reasons for embarking upon the Science Foundation year. And this gives them an opportunity to reflect upon any aspects of their education that haven't gone as well as they'd wished in the past. So there can be some confidence knocks that we're trying to build back up again. But they can also reflect upon any successes and try and build upon them and build confidence. And it means that we know the students before they even arrive. So in that first meeting with their personal tutor, we've got all their information. They're really kind of personal reflections on what's been happening to get them to us. And we can set learning targets right from welcome week. And of course, it means that we can direct them to the appropriate support in a proactive manner, hopefully before any problems are encountered. Students also sit diagnostic tests for each module. So these are online, they're self-marked, and they are purely for the students. So this will help them understand for each module where their knowledge gaps might be, because they come with such varying experiences to us. So they can prioritise their efforts in their independent study. And again, it helps tutors to signpost to the most appropriate support resources. Okay, so the rules of the game. So this paper that I've referenced here, the references at the end, it says, I'll read a quote for you. It's a social and cultural practice that's laden with the potential to exclude those who don't have the cultural knowledge or capital. And a lack of familiarity with the language and practices of higher education has been shown to affect a student's sense of belonging, and that translates into success. So as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that we offer students before they arrive is a higher education glossary, which we co-authored with our students, sort of said, what did you find tricky? What was it that perplexed you? And we also got input from our academics and support services. So I'm going to have a peek at the Padlet to see if you had any ideas that I haven't thought of yet. Just go in there when the Wi-Fi lets me. Oh, so we've still got the difference between formative and summative. Oh, are you guys all confident with HE technology, with HE terminology? Is there anything anyone wants to shout out that they've found confusing in the past? No? Okay, I'll tell you one of mine. Oh, William, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I think attainment is often a word that students don't really understand because it can mean so many different things.
Yeah,
So,
good point. Yeah, and it's got connotations as well, hasn't it, in terms of what you've done and what actually your learning environment has allowed. So yeah, it's a good one. I think one that got me as well, having been a teacher before, is the word school. So we came in with school being GCSEs and sixth form, and then when we got to university, the schools were, you know, life sciences or geography, and the college was science. And they said, but we've been to college, and everyone could get a little bit confused. So let me just show you, if I can, the HE glossary that we set up. So I've put this on the Padlet, so if anyone wants to use it, feel free. Just let me know so that I can be proud. That'd be great. So we've come up with things that help them when we talk about who to contact, so who administrators are, who academics are, that kind of thing. Collusion, citations, what a credit is, what a module is, what a seminar is, what the difference between a seminar, a lecture, a tutorial, that kind of thing. As well as some links to support services, so student wellbeing, for example. If we're talking about where to get advice, we've got the links to the advice centre and the support centre. And we found that this can really help our international students in particular. So I'll leave that on the Padlet there for you to have a look at. Okay, so they've come in on Welcome Week, and students have reported to us that some of them find it quite challenging if they're not interested in going out drinking and clubbing, and they sometimes feel a little bit left out. Universities are getting better at that, but we try and put on extra activities to make sure that they feel that everybody feels welcome and has something to participate in. So we do the cheesy team building, the icebreakers, trying to help students be confident around the campus. And we found that those peer support networks that are built in those first week last all year. And the students actually look back and go, oh yeah, that was cheesy, but actually I met some of my friends that have lasted for the whole year. And I think institutions across probably the country and across the globe really have found that students are finding it difficult to get back to face-to-face sessions. I know we've had attendance wobbles where we are. And we called in our student reps and we said, what's going on? What can we do to help? And we were expecting things about academic skill gaps and support that they needed. And actually, they just said to us, we've lost confidence in building relationships. We don't quite know how to make friends. It all kind of happened in Welcome Week. And then if we didn't get it, we don't go to things because we don't know anybody, and people have just lost confidence with socialization. So what they've asked us for next year is that we carry on this kind of relationship building and friendly activities. What I've put there is re-socialization. That seems to be the skill got within our students that we're getting. It's not just academic anymore. So all our students have access to PAL schemes, so peer-assisted learning, from students in higher years of their degree. But something that was really successful this year was we set up a specific PAL for mature students. So I've been a mature student. I know what it's like when you come in and surrounded by 18-year-olds and you just feel a little bit out of place and like you're not interested in the same things or worried about the same things. And that's what our mature students say to us as well. So all incoming mature Science Foundation year students are now paired with a mature student mentor who is somebody who's been through the Science Foundation year and is now in a later year of the same degree programme. And we provide scaffolded training and support for our mentors so that they know what to take on and what not, what to pass on to a specialist, so that they're supported as well. And those relationships last all year as well. And there's just a couple of quotes I've pulled out there. The first one says, "I was desperately nervous about starting university. I felt like I was going to be completely out of place and nearly bottled it and didn't attend. But early contact from my mentor calmed me and made me realise that not everyone's lives revolved around student night." And another one saying, "I love the fact that my 3-year-old was welcome to the mature student lunch. It made me feel that my tutors understood my needs." And we know, as somebody with family or caring responsibilities, having that part of your life confident and secure can make all the difference in how well you can concentrate. Okay. So I think that's everything I say for now about welcome. So once they're here and once they're in and everybody knows that they're welcome, how do we maybe try and help students to feel like this learning is for them and one size doesn't necessarily fit all? Okay, so this year, to help with that, we set up the Skills for Success support unit. Students were telling us that they were a bit overwhelmed at the beginning of the year as they were told everything and had meetings from every single service across campus in that first week. And information overload just meant that they started to just not take in any information anymore. And then the other thing our personal tutors was telling us was that they were finding that it was actually the non-academic skills, those holistic skills, that were having an impact on whether students could concentrate on their studies or not. So it was things like how to budget their money, how to cook a nutritious meal, how to get to sleep at night and actually, stay asleep and get a good sleep routine. It was things like digital literacy. So students, suddenly we call them digital natives, but just because they know how to use Snapchat doesn't mean that they know how to use the technology that we need them to. Relationship skills. Stress resilience is a huge one. You can see the things on the screen there. So instead of trying to cram this into Welcome Week, we tried to move this to be a semester-long unit. And to make it individualized, because we know that different students have different needs, we would have a compulsory session each week, but which session a student attended was optional. So attendance was compulsory, but they had choice in which sessions was most important to them. So at the beginning of the week, we would send out a form, something like this. It said, we've got 4 sessions in the slot this week. So this one, for example, has got homesickness, organisation, Office 365 and mathematical coding. And students would select on the form which session they'd want to attend, and then we'd jig around rooms and staff to try and make sure that everybody could be accommodated, and trying to make sure that you've got a range of sessions. So some of our 18-year-olds might be feeling really homesick by this point and need some wellbeing support, but that's not really going to apply to a mature student. But their Office 365 skills might not be quite where we need them to be. So just trying to get some variety so that students can personalize their learning journey to make it feel relevant to them and they can get the most out of it. And we had a look to see, so I told you about some of our attainment data at the beginning. That was at the end of the year as they move into year 1. So we had a look now about what was happening at the beginning of the year in the first semester and weeks when they get to us. So this graph shows you the blue bars are some of our attainment before we introduced Skills for Success. So this was pre-pandemic actually in 18-19. Once we'd introduced this unit, we looked at the attainment in the associated academic skills module. So the ones where they were writing essays, presentations, reflections, things that would seemingly not be that related to, managing your stress. But the attainment gaps closed and actually sometimes reversed. So we've used the Office for Students categories here. You can see that for students from Asian backgrounds, we had a 3% attainment gap and that closed completely. For Black students, we went from more than 4 to actually the Black students starting to overachieve. Same for mixed ethnicities. IMD1, if you're not familiar with it, is Index of Multiple Deprivation 1. So this is students in the toughest socioeconomic regions of the country, but that's where they had their schooling. We had an attainment gap, which we've managed to reduce, but we haven't quite got there. So it's only 1%, but we still have a bit of a gap there. So I think that's going to be our focus as we move forwards. Mature students are flying after Skills for Success. So they're outperforming our young students now, which makes you wonder what we need to be doing for young students. And students with a mental health condition, we had an attainment gap, but now they're actually outperforming students without conditions. We had a big focus on support for mental health. So overall message, personalising learning journeys and concentrating on those holistic skills can actually have that knock-on effect into academic attainment. Okay, a second way that we've tried to personalise our journeys is through flipped learning. So I guess some of you will be already very familiar with this, but just a brief introduction. The kind of concept behind flipped learning is that in traditional learning, in your face-to-face sessions, that might be where the knowledge transfer is taking place, your traditional kind of didactic teaching, if you like. The knowledge is being transferred to the students and their job is to understand it and to remember it. And then we send them off home with the more creative tasks, where they're asked to apply their knowledge to practice exam questions or, analytical tasks, case studies, and they tend to be doing that at home without the support of the lecturer or their peers. If we flip that, so flipping the Bloom's triangle, if you like, to the right-hand side of the diagram, if we set pre-learning tasks where the knowledge transfer takes place at home before students come to the session, so for us, this was asynchronous lecture videos, but it could be PowerPoints or reading or whatever it is that suits your students. Students come armed with the knowledge, and that means that when we get to the face-to-face sessions, that's when we can do the higher order cognitive thinking. So we can introduce the case studies, we can evaluate, we can have the ethical debates, and we can do the exam practice when there's support in place. So that's the theory behind flipped learning, but we wanted to know if actually the theory held up in practice. So we did a little bit of research. And we took two topics from the biology curriculum. We taught the first half, so the first topic, if you like, in a traditional sense. And then we moved on to the next section and we taught that flipped. So all students had the same experience. But with the Science Foundation year students, often these are students who haven't done as well as they would have liked in the past. So we wanted to see what impact this would have on students who hadn't got the top grades before they came to see us. So when we analysed our results, we stratified the students into high achievers, which were students who'd previously got A or A star grades in their GCSEs, or the qualifications that they take when they're 16. And then we looked at standard achievers who'd got B or C grades at GCSE in their science. And we had a look to see if flipped learning made any difference by analysing the results of their end of semester exam, really. And we marked the questions that were taught in a traditional sense and the questions that was taught in the flipped method. And we found over the whole cohort that teaching by the flipped method had increased attainment by 12%. That was for the cohort overall, which is quite significant when we think about degree classifications being 10% boundaries. But then we wanted to look and see who this had really affected. For our high achievers, there was still a difference, but it was, down to kind of a 5% difference between the traditional and flipped topics. But where this had really had an impact was our standard achievers. So there was a 17% difference in marks for the topics where they'd been taught in the traditional sense or the flipped sense. And when we asked our students, they told us things like, it meant that I could take my time over the pre-learning. If I wasn't confident with it, I could go back over it. I could take it at my own pace. I could get support. So everybody was at a level playing field when they came in to those face-to-face sessions. And of course, in terms of flexibility, it means that you can do that, that acquisition of knowledge, if you like, in your own time. It means that you can do it at a time that suits you. If you've got caring responsibilities, you do it around the kids or around your relatives, and you can rewind things and watch them again. So flexibility, one size doesn't always fit all. So that meant that we flipped the entire Science Foundation year curriculum, all our science and all our maths modules. Everything is delivered through asynchronous pre-learning videos. And a quick run through of what we found to be important in those: captions. So every student wants accurate captions, not just students that have learning needs, but international students who are using new terminology, or students with dyslexia who want to make cognitive connections between those words and the sounds or what you're displaying on the screen. And they're just something that everybody seems to want. We had that debate that I think everybody has on, do we show our faces on the screen when we do the videos, or do we leave it to the information? We found that students want personal introductions and ends to videos. So they want us to introduce it, how it's relevant, what's going on in the world. But then when it comes to kind of the hard facts, when it comes to science and maths, we disappear, and they can concentrate on the information that's on perhaps the PowerPoint slides. And this means that it makes it easier to edit if your face isn't there and you're not suddenly moving and what you're saying doesn't match. And hopefully it means that the content that doesn't change year from year is reusable. So this is it's an investment of your time to produce the videos. And if something happens in the world that you want to update upon and say, oh, well, look at this pandemic data, you can just clip off the introductions and the ends and make new ones. So recyclable is really good for staff. And then we found that embedding understanding checks in the videos was really popular. So you deliver a certain couple of minutes of information, and then the video stops and it asks you a question, something simple like a multiple choice or a fill in the gaps, but it just helps students to check their understanding as they go along and stops them from wandering off as well to make a cup of tea. Students said 10 minutes was about their maximum in terms of concentration. So we broke things up into 10-minute chunks. And then we gave them a support mechanism. So while flexibility and when you do this is fantastic, some students watching these videos wanted us there and then to kind of answer any immediate questions. So we had lecture watch slots where we said, if you want to watch the videos at this time of the week, we will be available on Teams for any immediate questions. That's not compulsory. If you want to watch them when suits you, that's fine. But if you're the kind of person who wants us there, we will be. So that means that if the knowledge transfer has already taken place, it freed up our seminars so that we could be much more interactive and again allow flexibility and personalisation in what students wanted to do in those seminars. A couple of quick examples. If a student arrives, they can choose their challenge. So I don't know what a student needs out of this session. So I might be able to say, okay, we were looking at DNA replication. Do you really just need to embed this here and check that you understand it? Do you want some practice assessment questions that I can provide for you? Or is it that you feel quite confident and you want to know how this relates to the real world and apply some contextual stuff? Okay, here's a drug that's now being prescribed for COVID-19. You go and find out how it works and how it relates to the mechanism of DNA synthesis, and then we'll all report back and have a chat about it. Or do you prefer something much more hands-on? I can provide the beads and the elastic, and you can make a DNA bracelet based upon the DNA code of your name. So just something fun that helps to embed the learning. So choose your challenge is something that's always been quite popular with our students. Something else that we've taken forward from pandemic teaching is students really like the chat box. So they like to be able to sit at home and contribute to a session without actually having to speak in front of 200-300 students. And it's nice to be able to cater for those students who still want to contribute, but just in a quieter way. So one thing that we've really enjoyed using is Talis Elevate. So this is where you upload a document or a previous assessment submission or a video now, and students can annotate it as a group. So they select a bit of the text, they write their comment, they can choose whether to do that anonymously or with their name, completely up to the student. And then students can reply to each other. And we create sort of a nested dialogue between students live in the session. So some people are contributing verbally and some people are using this group annotation. And it's a really good way of embedding the mark scheme as well. If you put up an old submission and say, how did this meet the criteria and how didn't it? Students can pick it apart and you can save all the comments and they can take those away for after the session. So again, it's good for students who were ill and couldn't make the session. Okay, so a couple of ways of personalising the learning there. The last thing I wanted to talk about was some ways that we've tried to make sure that students in our cohort feel that they belong at our university and in our programmes. So a new initiative this year was a staff-student partnership called Hidden Histories. This is where we recruited 6 students who were either final year students or master's students in the College of Science, and we supported them to research under-celebrated scholars in science and maths. So they've been overlooked perhaps in the past due to their ethnicity, due to their gender, age, disability, whatever it might be, they are not prominent in the curriculum as they should be. And our curriculums, especially in science and maths, can be very white Eurocentric narratives. And we'd like to start to chip away at that and change the narratives. So students could choose their interest. So this is just a few examples of the people that our students picked to research. So top left, we've got Alan Turing, who was hugely discriminated against due to his sexuality. We've got Madhava of Sangamagara in the bottom left, who developed early calculus in India. It wasn't all Isaac Newton, as we tell them. He got there first. We've got top right, we've got, I'm thinking of his name, Juan Simus from America, who invented smallpox inoculation long before Jenna did, that we tell all our students about. So he's from present day Libya. We have people whose work wasn't credited. So bottom right, this is Martha Gauthier, who's a French cardiologist, who first identified that 3 copies of chromosome 21 lead to Down syndrome, but this was credited to her male collaborator, who she sent her slides to for a bit of feedback. More modern day scientists. So in the middle is Kizzmekia Corbett, who is the head of the lab that created the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. So that's just a snapshot, but these are the kind of things that students were researching. And we really, really didn't want to be flashing up a picture and being tokenistic. We wanted to embed these voices and these narratives and these contributions into our curriculum. So we asked students to create interactive seminar resources. So students moved on with the learning, actually doing activities based upon the hidden history scholars' contributions. So just a quick one here that's above my head, so because this is from the maths team. Once we talked about Alan Turing's coding, they had some coding to do themselves. And then one that's a bit more up my street because it's biology. When we'd introduced a clinical geneticist who had Turner syndrome, which is where you have 1 copy of an X chromosome rather than 2 that's most commonly seen in females. We looked at how we might interpret common syndromes that you see in curricula all over, like red-green colour blindness, but how we might interpret them for people who have different makeup of sex chromosomes. So Turner syndrome was here, linking it to our hidden history. We've got Klinefelters who are XXY, XYY males, XX males, etc. So just trying to diversify our genetics curriculum. There are a couple of quick examples, and we evaluated this, and this is very, very early days. We've only, say, done a few examples so far, but 92% of our cohort found that the seminar activities diversified their awareness of contributors to STEM, and 82% agreed that they encouraged a sense of belonging in STEM for students from all backgrounds. And this actually rose to 93% of our cohort for LGBTQ plus students. I think this because the scientists that we happened to pick this year had some LGBTQ backgrounds. And we had feedback like, it brings the true brilliant minds to the forefront as they deserve, which overall makes me happy. So this is something that we're going to extend into future years and keep chipping away at our curriculum and hopefully ever diversify it. And if anybody wants to join us in this, we'd love to move this across institutions. So just send me a quick message and we can pair up and make this a bit broader. Something else that we found that has helped with belonging this year is having student interns. So these are SFY alumni. So they've been through the foundation year and they're now in later years of the degree. And we pay them to come into our teaching sessions and support our cohort. But we don't just want them to be kind of passive people that we just pass work off onto. Our interns get a scaffolded program of pedagogical skill development. So they are taught in a graduate way how to deliver the pedagogical theory. They get opportunities to deliver to a small group, to lead the lecture theatre, to get feedback every session. And we're finding that our interns, they're now going on to PGCEs or they're heading for lectureships within our university. So it's helped them, but the current cohort are really positive about this. So when we surveyed them, 100% of our current cohort found that the teaching interns helped them to understand the seminar content and encouraged them to engage with their studies. And then for us at foundation year, one of our battles is to make sure they see the foundation content as relevant to later years of their degrees. And we had an 83% agreement that the interns had helped them with that. And in terms of the qualitative comments, I'd like to reassure you that we are really friendly lecturers and students do, like to talk to us, but you wouldn't know it from these comments. So everything that came out was how much they loved having interns who are a similar age, similar sort of stage of life to them in the room. So it's easier to talk to the teaching interns. The ability to have a student's perspective on the topics is nice. Since they were similar to me, I felt less awkward approaching them, explained things in different ways, and helped me to see how what we learn is a foundation for later years. So peer-to-peer learning is really powerful. And it was nice for our students to have those real models, if you like, of students that have just done what they have done and are really successful along the way in their program. Okay, finally, we want to make sure that everybody feels that they belong in higher education because the learning is accessible to everybody as we can make it. So inclusivity by default is something that we'd like to aim for. We have students with learning support plans, but it's nice not to have to make adjustments because everything is already accessible. So the kind of adjustment becomes the exception rather than the rule. Now, I know a lot of different institutions have different levels of training on accessibility, but I think that the struggle that some program leaders have is once staff have been trained on how you make accessible resources, what do they then do with it? Because it's easy to do the training and then wander off and forget all about it. So we've introduced accessibility audits into all our modules. These aren't meant to be punitive or sort of nasty. They're meant to be very supportive. They can be used for self-reflection as well as some feedback from an EDI lead. And we would kind of pick a week of each module and then go through and look at the resources and check for things like files are available in modifiable formats, that resources are accessible in terms of font type, color, size, the background color of the sides, avoiding block capitals and italics for students with dyslexia, that slides have got titles so screen readers can navigate through them, that the hyperlinks are informative, that the reading order's set correctly, and that all images have got alternative texts, etc., etc. So you can see the list there, and I've put our accessibility audit on Padlet in case it's of interest or of any use to anybody. But we've found that that's helped staff to make kind of incremental changes. So on the form, there's an action plan of what I'm going to do by when. And it brings home that you don't have to kind of have solved the world in one step, but this is what I'm going to do in the next few months. And those incremental changes can add up to really meaningful change over time. But we kind of think it's good for our students to be able to produce accessible content themselves. It's the right thing to do, but it's also a key graduate skill because it's becoming the law. So one of the things we try to do is embed accessibility into our assessment criteria. So for example, here, if a student's going to do an assessed presentation, they wouldn't be able to get the top marks unless their slides were fully accessible. Things that I've listed, the fonts, the colours, the alt text for their diagrams, that they've got captions that are fully edited for accuracy, or they've got their camera on or are facing the audience for lip reading. So let's embed it on our new kind of generation so that it becomes the norm. I haven't got time to go through this slide, but what we do with students is take a poorly accessible resource and work with them to make it accessible so that we can model that for them. Okay, and the last thing that I'll just touch on before I finish is the move to online assessments. So we talk about accessibility of teaching resources, but if your assessments are online, they are under all exactly the same guidance and law, really, as any other online resource. So any images in online assessment should have informative alt texts. And one of the things that we've found quite challenging as a team this year is how do we provide informative alt text on an assessment without giving away the answers? So I think a teaching alt text, which helps students to make cognitive connections like the one on the screen. So this is telling people this is a voltmeter, you've got a bulb in a circuit, here's a cell at the top. That's great for cognitive connections for teaching. But in an assessment, excuse me, in an assessment, you wouldn't be able to do that. We'd have to do something different. So it might be that we have to say, there's a square, it's got a circle with a cross in it. And around that circle with the cross, there's a V in a circle. There's one vertical line at the top next to a shorter line at the top. So our students, they need the alt text, but the challenge for us now is producing alt text, which the students still need to interpret in order to be able to do the assessment. And I think it's good to remind staff that even though there is a bit of a caveat in the law about assessment images, the guidance still is that if non-text content is a test or exercise that would be invalid if presented in text, text alternatives should at least provide descriptive identification of the non-text content. So that's our future challenge. Okay, so hopefully I've tried to say how an inclusive welcome, personalisation and flexibility, and then helping our students to really feel embedded so that they belong in our institution is leading to student success. So thank you so much for listening to that, and I'd be really happy to take any of your questions or comments.